Hello everyone, and today we are going to create this accordion, and we can also convert it into a vertical accordion rather than horizontal accordion very easily. But for this one I'll show you vertical, and then I'll show you how to change it to an horizontal too. This is a completely responsive one, so if I go into my inspect and then let's make it, let's say, smaller like this, you could see how this works. So now we can simply just make it go up and down. We just need to change the border size. I forgot to do this, sorry, border radius, so I'll update it later. But you could see that for the tablet too it works in this section, but if we go into our bigger screen, which is desktop, it just changes into this size or this method, which is like horizontal, and this changes to vertical. But if you want to do vertical for the whole website, you could easily do it, no issues with that. And you can also do it with just coding. So if you want to do with just coding, I also have a CodePen link in the description, but you can still watch this video and understand how this works, so that you could then refer to CodePen for the HTML part, because this one does not require HTML as we are using Elementor page builder. Now first thing first, I'll simply show you how we can make this, and then I'll explain to you the code so that you could customize it later. So if you go to this website, which I'll link in the description, you will get the code around here, which is this one, which is CSS, and this is the JavaScript that we are going to use, and I'll explain to you how to change it. Even if you don't understand CSS and JavaScript, just watch it so that you could change it to your own requirement. You don't really need to understand it if you're just trying to make the design. Okay, so also ignore this part. This is like a temporary page, you could see, and this is another tutorial that I'm going to make, the left before and after in Elementor, how we can make this. So we will start in making with Elementor, but if you're using just code, you could refer to my CodePen, and I have used like the div class and all that you could like just copy and check how that works. But the CSS and JavaScript functions are pretty common, or like pretty similar to what we are going to do in Elementor. So let's just start it. So in the Elementor, we are actually going to create one container so that we could just have something to hold it, I guess. I'll just make it full, maybe not full width. Let's do something like this and do center. You don't have to do this. It's from here you need to start. So inside of this one, I'm just going to make a container like this. I'm going to give it full width, give it 25%. Okay, now this is how it looks, but right now we want it to go from left to right, so let's just make it left to right like this. And also let's duplicate this one, let's duplicate this one, and because we want 4 and 100 divided by 4 is 25, so we use that value. Now for the first container, we'll just give it a CSS class of column, and inside of this we will actually add our image or whatever background image that we want. So for this one, I'm going to use this image, there is it, like this. Make it center, do display cover, because that's what I want the settings to be. You could do any settings that you want. Now this is way too small, right? So for time being, let's just remove this effect. We will add it later. And for the first one, we actually want border radius on top and this side, but we will do that later. So let's just keep it in sharp corners for time being. Now our next step is to actually add our CSS that I provided, because that adds lots of the functionality that we want it to happen. So inside of this container, or you could just, if you have Elementor Pro, what you could do is you could go into advanced and add it here. But if you don't have Elementor Pro, what we can simply do is we will need to use HTML widget. So HTML, let's add it inside of this one. So you could see it got added around here. Make sure your navigator is on. And what we can simply do is we can just hide it so that it does not take any space. So technically, even if you do not do this, it should not take any space, but sometimes it takes like 4 or 5 pixels sometimes. So I just like to keep it hidden because the code is still going to work. Instead of this, let's just add this code. Okay, and let's say if you are using custom CSS in this container, just make sure you remove the style. Okay, so this and this, you remove it. But if you are using the free version method, which is adding in HTML, you will need to do this. So you can see, even though we added it, it did nothing, absolutely nothing. But let's say if I add an text inside of this one, which is white in color, and if I give this a class of, let's say, inner dash element, you could see it just disappeared. Now that is because our CSS has that effect where it just makes it hidden by default. So you could see that nothing's showing around here. So we have anything that is inside of the non-expanded one should be hidden like this. So that is how we added, like we basically given the inner containers as inner element CSS, but we will add it later. So currently, as we can see, nothing is happening. We also need to add our scripting. So let's add our script, which is, I just copied it. You could copy this whole and add it in your HTML like this. So if you are using Elementor Pro, your style or your CSS would be here, but you will still add this HTML widget with the script. And you could see that now it starts to work. Let's say it does not work in your screen, right? So let's just update it. And in your editor, it does not work. It's okay. Usually it should not work, but for some reason it is working on my website. But normally it would not work in your editor. You need to check around here. So you can see that as soon as we click, it just extends to this size. And it also adds like a black overlay on it. And that's because we added our CSS and JavaScript, and all we did was give this CSS class of column. So we will do this same. So let's just delete all the 3 that we created like this. And let's duplicate it like this, so that we got 4 like this. And now you can see it is hard to edit because we clicked on it, and which is why usually what I like to do is I first like to do the everything that we want to do around here and then add this. But let's say your code is not working. So what you could do is you could update your editor and just refresh it. Sometimes it works in the editor and sometimes it does not. So it's very dependent on like what code you have used. Now you could see that this is what it looks, and now it actually works in the editor too. But sometimes if it doesn't work, you will need to check on the live page. Okay. So let's go into our container and then look at our HTML. So what we are doing in this HTML, let me explain to you guys. In the CSS, you could see we have a class called expanded, and basically it has a width of 150%. So around here, you could see that these are given 25%. And when we click on it, it basically changes the width to 150%. So from 25 to 150 whenever we are clicked. And based on what you want, if you change this to, let's say, 200 or just 100, you could just choose the size that you want based on your click. So here you could just choose how much the sizing should be when on the expanded state like this. Then expanded after is basically adding the overlay. So you could see that black overlay. So if you want any other colors, just simply change the background and it will add that overlay. Now we have tablet and mobile wave. So basically this code, you could see we have given add media screen minimum width and this much. So this much code will only work when the width of the screen is higher than 1024 pixels. So this code will only work for the desktop, because we want to change the width based only for desktop, but when we are in mobile and tablet, we want to change the height, right? So if you go down, you could see that this one is like anything that is below 1024 pixels, which is by default like Elementor's responsive stuff. So if I hover on this, you could see that it shows 1024 pixels and down and 767. So basically, if you want another configuration for mobile wave, for example, right now this one would use 100 pixels for mobile. So if we actually make it go to tablet portrait, right now you could see obviously nothing's happening because we need to go in here, make it be vertical like this, you could see, and make all of this go 100% like this. So let's make it 100%. If you're using only coding, check my CodePen code, because in that one we do it in the code directly. So now you could see that for the tablet, this is 100 pixels in height, and even for mobile, we have it 100 pixels in height, and when we hover on it, which is when we click on it, we make it 500 pixels in height. So if you want to have a different height for mobile version, just copy this much code, paste it again, and just change it to 767. and that would make anything that is below 767 have that different sizing that you want, like height and height, like this. And then we have inner elements, and that I'll show you later what we are going to do. And in this one we have the script JavaScript, and JavaScript is very easy. In this JavaScript is very easy. We are basically saying that so we create for columns, right? So these columns, we just add our column into JavaScript, and we add an event listener called click. So on click, when we click on the column, so basically when we click on this column, we want to add our class expanded to the column. So basically you could see that if I update this, let me update this, and if I close it, sorry, refresh it, you could see all of them are like this. But in this code, if I refresh this page, you would see that this one is automatically activated. And the way this works is, if I go to my inspect, if I choose my first column, you could see that it has a class, like two big class, this Elementor and all. But here you could see we have our class that we have given called column. So this is the one that we added around here. So column, right? So as soon as we click on it, where is it? Okay. So let me just make it dock or ball below. So you could see we have column right now. So if I click on it, you could see we added a class called expanded, like this. And when we click on somewhere else, it changes it to the expanded. So what we are doing is, when we click on somewhere, so when we click on the column, we are adding the class expanded, and which is this one. So this code. So we are basically adding this CSS with 150% to our column, like this. So what we can simply do is, in the CSS class, if we want any of this container to be activated by default, we will add expanded class like this by default. Okay. So if I refresh now, you would see that by default it is already expanded, because we already added our expanded class around here. So when we click now, it will just work like this. So if we wanted it to be bigger, we can just change this value, and that would be the expanded size that we want. So 200, 300, or just 50, 70, whatever you want, you could do that. And the way we use this JavaScript is, if it checks that if our column is the clicked version, so if we click on this one, it will add this expanded class. But if it is not the clicked version, it will remove the expanded class. So basically, if we click around here, it adds the expanded class here and removes the expanded class from all three. Now this two already didn't had it, so it removed from here. So right now if I click on it, it will try to remove from all three of this, but if this two already don't have it, so it just removes it here, and then it uses the default value, which is like which is whatever we set it around here, like this. And this is the same way we also add the inner element, but there's one thing that we need to do for the inner element. So let me see if I add this thing and then make it white in color. So this is basically our text, and now you could see that it is not being visible, right? All we simply need to do is give it a higher Z index, because right now it is being behind our black overlay. So just give it like 2 Z index or something, and it will show. You could style it however you want, like this. Make it go at the bottom. That's what I've done, like this. Now before that, I don't want it to be so big, so let's just go into the code. If you don't want to do it via code, you could just add your own height around here and make sure that this setting is enabled, which is center. So that way it will only use 600 pixels that you have added around here. But another way to do it is, let me remove this center. In our code, which is in the HTML, we can just give it a height around here, because we have already given column class to everywhere. So we can just give it a height of 600 pixels around here, and it would still work. I'll just make it be in the center like this. You can see it still works. Now this one is being visible, so we can just hide it around here. It will still run, it's just hidden the HTML code. And that way we can just control all of the sizes very easily with just one code instead of going into individual. Now around here we'll just make it call like anything else. So I'll call it coastal caves. and you can do it however you want. I'll just add a text paragraph below this, make this white, and do all your styling that you want to. Make it say index p2 or something like this. Now you can see we are going to face one problem. Now right now we are not going to face this issue currently, because if I make the text be bigger, so let's imagine you had lots of content inside of this one. It doesn't have to be just text, it can be anything else like image and all. If we make it smaller, it is currently doing this thing which is working because we have given height and 600 pixels like this. But let's say for some reason, now if we wouldn't have given it a height, this is what would have happened. It would have stretched it like this, you could see. So let's just give it a height of 600 pixels and then overflow hidden, which means that it will not stretch and then anything is just hidden like this. So you could configure it however you want. In the previous version, which is in this version, I've done it differently. That is, I've simply added a container inside of this, or not even add a container. I've just given this like position absolute values like this, but I think this method works better. So we can simply just make it be like height like this, go 10 like this, so that it does not take any space. But I believe you don't need to do this, because if we add our height, it just works perfectly. Now because we have hidden, every time I click it just takes me to like the top part, which is kind of annoying. And here you just have to do is click on here, and anything that needs to hide when we like click everywhere else, all you simply need to do is click and give it class of inner element. Give this one class of inner element like this. Now it is hidden, you could see. Not what we want. We want it to be visible when we are around here like this. So let me update it and see. So you can see that when we click on it, it just starts showing up like this. But we want it to be visible already, right? We don't want it to be not visible when it's literally the first screen. So in the HTML, just the way we did it for expanded, which is right now we add like expanded CSS class into our column to make it use this value. We have done the same thing and we have given it called inner elements.active, right? So active is what it uses. So this active gets added into our this element. So if I go in my code, you could see that if the inner element parent element is clicked, so basically if this elements, so wherever it is, right now it is not visible for some reason, but the heading which was shown around here, if the parent element is column, which is obviously that column, we can add active class like this and it will be visible. So all we simply do is add the active class by default like this. And you could see how this works. It just shows up like this. And the way I actually did it before this one is I actually added a container inside of this one. I added this heading inside of this container, and then I added this paragraph inside of this one. See, sometimes if you're not able to add it, you could use the navigator and it just works better. And now we have it in the container like this, and we just give this like position absolute. That's what I've done, but I don't think you might need to do this. And the reason why we do this is because we don't want this this column to stretch if the content is getting bigger. So usually it shouldn't do any issues, but if it does an issue, you will need to use a container inside of this and give it absolute, and then basically give it a height from below or something like this one. This step is unnecessary, but it's only to be done if it is stretching the container for some reason. Now below this one, what I'm going to do is in the column one, I'm going to give an icon like this one, and then give it a icon of, I guess, check mark. We can do anything that we want. I'll do framed. I'll make it be in the left side and then give it a z index of 2. Make sure this is like white in color, like this. Let's make this a bit higher. You don't need to do it this way. You can just do with like normal Elementor settings. You don't need to use the absolute value. You could just use padding and all. And this one we are not actually going to give our our CSS class, because we don't want this to hide. So if you go around here, you could see that this designs are not getting hidden like this. So what would happen if I try to do this? It works kinda, but I would suggest giving this an absolute value, because right now it is working, but if it gets stretched like this, it might not work if the size of this was like way too big. So let's do like 50, let's do 100. Let's see what it does. Well, it is still working, but let's say if it does not work and it just starts getting smaller. Usually that's what would happen. But if you're not using, let's say, image, if you're not using any icon, or if you're using any image, I'll suggest using absolute. Go at the bottom and then just give it, let's say, 10 and 10 like this. This is only if it does not work, okay? If by default it starts messing up, and like this we can just give it absolute, and yeah, you could see it just works perfectly. Let's do an update. Let's refresh this page, and then let's look at it. And yeah, you could see how this works. Right now this is not even showing. Now if you are seeing why this is not getting shown, right, makes sense. Or basically in the code what we are doing is we are looking for the parent element, right? So if we go inside of my code, which is around here, let's see, you can see that we check if the inner element's parent element is the clicked version, which is basically we are checking if it's the click version. Now if we add our elements in a container like this is not the parent element. The column is not our parent element after all, or parent container. It is this one which is inside of this one. So we cannot we cannot add our CSS class in here. We need to add it around to this container. You could see now this is the parent and this is the child. This is basically the grandchild. So we have to make sure that this is added around here. If you are using container, if not, you don't need to do that. Let's do a refresh. And you could see now it should be visible like this. So some more configuration. Now basically all we simply do is edit to make it to whatever is design that you want. So if we go around here, we can add a border on, you see, like left, top right, bottom left, right? So 10, 15, and in this one we just gave it like, so like top right, bottom, so right and bottom like this. And we basically do the same steps everywhere. Now if we go into our tablet portrait, you could see this is how it looks. We can decrease the size of this one to match it, or we can just play around with the values with the absolute, which is like 25, 20, let's do 20, and then it would still work. You could play around with the mobile values. Now to change the design for this one, so if we go into our HTML again, let me go in here instead. You could see that this one is what we are using for tablet and mobile. So this is where we change the height, which is like the default height. So let me go to that section. You could see this is what we are using. So if I change this height, which is the default height, let me go to that section and change this to, let's say, 200. You could see that this is now using 200, which is the closed one. If we do 50, it's using that one. And then for the opened version, which is like this expanded version, this is where we can change it. So we can make it use 1000 pixels, which is like super big, or we could make it use just like 200 pixels. So this just comes down to your preference, your design that you're using. Make sure you make it bigger so that the content is fitting nicely like this. And that's all you need to do. But let's say if you want to convert it into like a into not having like this horizontal way and all should be vertical, you simply do column vertical like this, which is in this container. We do column vertical. Let's remove the center, or we can keep it center. And instead of in the HTML, you could see we just remove this one, which controls the, where is it? We just remove this one because we don't want to control the width anymore. So I'll just remove this one like this. Now this is how it looks. Weird, but and because in this one we just need to go and choose our size that we want. So let's do, let's say 70%. You could do in pixels too, no issues. Let's do 70% for each column like this. Go into our HTML. I hate that it just scrolls up every time. We remove this code, which is like just for, instead of just using for tablet, we can make it use for the complete website, so even for desktop. Or what we could have done is, so instead of deleting this one, we are going to do is, instead of in the expanded version, we are going to use the same expanded code that is around here and add it. So height like this, and the width we can actually change it via here like this. If we wanted to, we could have obviously done it in the HTML too without any issues in the column around here. And now you could see that this is kind of working, but we don't want it. We actually need to give it a height around here. So I want the height, the default height, to be 100 pixels. And then we need to give it a transition for a height of 0.5 seconds. So 0.5 seconds. So the same code that we have used around here, you could see this much. We are just adding it around here for the desktop version. You could see how nicely it works. And just play around with the values. Instead of using width around here, we are just using height and basically just changing the way it looks. So in column vertical and stuff. And that's all we need to do to make it work perfectly. So yeah, if you have any questions, write it in the comment, like and subscribe for more. And yeah, that's all. Thanks for watching.